The stone walls of the great keep do not speak, but they breathe. If you stand very still in the corridors before the sun has even dared to touch the horizon, you can hear the castle exhaling the cold of the night, a slow and rhythmic draft that carries the scent of damp moss, extinguished tallow, and the ancient, lingering dust of centuries. My day begins in this silence, long before the king stirs, long before the knights clatter in the courtyard, and long before the fires are even a spark in the hearth. I am but a shadow among shadows, moving with a practiced, silent gait across the cold flagstones that have been worn smooth by 1,000 servants who walked this path before me. My boots, thin-soled and softened by years of use, make no sound as I descend the spiral staircase. Every step is a memory held in the muscle, a map of the castle etched into my very bones. I do not need a candle to find my way. I know where the floorboards groan and where the stones are uneven. The air in the lower levels is heavy and thick, smelling of the earth itself, as if the castle is rooted deep into the bedrock of the world. Here in the belly of the fortress, the silence is absolute. It is a heavy velvet blanket that wraps around your shoulders, urging you to move slowly, to breathe softly, to exist without disturbing the slumber of the great house above. I reach the kitchens, where the embers of last night's fire still glow with a dull, pulsing orange light, like the heartbeat of a sleeping beast. I begin the ritual of the morning, a series of movements so repetitive they have become a form of meditation. I gather the kindling, the wood dry and rough against my palms, and I stack it with a precision that requires no conscious thought. The clink of the iron poker against the grate is the first note in the symphony of the day, a small, lonely sound that marks the transition from the world of dreams to the world of service. There is a strange peace in this solitude, a quiet dignity in being the first to wake the fire, watching as the tiny sparks catch the straw and begin their slow, flickering dance upward. The warmth begins to radiate outward, a gentle wave that pushes back the chill of the morning. And for a brief moment, I am the center of the world, the one who brings the light. I move to the long wooden tables, their surfaces scarred by decades of knives and scrubbed pale by generations of lye. I begin to prepare the trays, laying out the linen cloths with a snap of the wrist that sends a small puff of air into the stillness. The fabric is cool and crisp, smelling faintly of lavender and sun-dried grass. My hands move with a life of their own, placing the silver goblets, the heavy pewter plates, and the delicate porcelain bowls in their designated spots. Everything has a place, a perfect, unchanging order that provides a sense of safety in a world that is often chaotic and loud. Outside the high, narrow windows, the sky is beginning to turn from a deep, bruised purple to a soft, misty gray. The birds are not yet singing, but the world is held in that breathless pause just before the first light breaks. I can hear the distant, rhythmic thumping of the sentries on the battlements, a steady heartbeat that echoes through the stone, reminding me that while I tend to the hearth, others tend to the walls. We are all parts of a grand, slow-moving machine, each of us a gear turning in the silence. I take the heavy iron keys from the hook, their weight a familiar pressure against my thigh, and I head toward the larders. The corridors here are narrower, the ceilings lower, and the air is cool and fragrant with the smell of smoked meats, dried herbs, and stored grain. It is a rich, earthy perfume that speaks of harvests and hard work, of the earth's bounty gathered and protected within these thick stone walls. I move past the sacks of flour, soft and white as fallen snow, and the jars of preserved fruit, their colors glowing like jewels in the dim light. There is no rush here. The castle demands a certain slowness, a deliberate pace that honors the weight of the time that has passed within these halls. I find myself lost in the rhythm of my own breathing, my thoughts drifting like the smoke from the kitchen fire, wandering through the memories of the day before and the quiet expectations of the day ahead. The transition from the belly of the castle to the upper tiers is a journey through changing atmospheres, a slow ascent from the damp smell of earth to the refined sense of beeswax, expensive oils, and ancient tapestries. As I carry the heavy silver tray up the grand staircase, the weight is a grounding force, a physical anchor that keeps my thoughts from drifting too far into the mists of the morning. Each step is a deliberate action, my muscles stretching and contracting in a familiar cadence that feels as natural as the beating of my heart. The light is changing now. The pale gray of the dawn is being pierced by thin, golden needles of sunlight that filter through the high, arched windows, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air like tiny, silent spirits. These specks of gold drift aimlessly, rising and falling on invisible currents of air, and I find myself watching them, mesmerized by their chaotic yet peaceful movement. The castle is no longer silent, but it is not yet loud. There is a soft, muffled quality to the morning, the distant sound of a heavy door closing somewhere in the barracks, the faint rustle of a broom against stone in a far-off gallery, the rhythmic dripping of condensation from a gargoyle's beak outside. I reach the long corridor that leads to the royal apartments, a place where the air feels thinner and more prestigious. Here the floor is covered with thick, woolen runners that swallow the sound of my footsteps entirely, creating a world of absolute, cushioned quiet. The walls are lined with portraits of kings and queens long dead, their painted eyes watching me with a cold, static indifference. I feel their presence not as a judgment, but as a part of the architecture, as much a part of the stone as the mortar itself. They are the anchors of history, and I am the fleeting breath of the present, moving through their world with a tray of bread and wine. I stop before the great oak doors of the royal bedchamber, the wood dark and polished to a mirror-like sheen. I do not knock. I wait. There is a specific moment, a subtle shift in the energy of the room behind the wood that tells me when it is time to enter. It is the sound of a heavy linen sheet shifting, or the soft creak of a bed frame. I press my shoulder against the door, pushing it open with a slow, controlled pressure to avoid any sudden noise. The room inside is vast, a cavern of shadows draped in velvet and silk. The air here is warm and stagnant, smelling of sleep and the dying embers of the hearth. I move like a ghost, crossing the expanse of the room toward the heavy curtains that surround the great bed. My task is not to wake the world with a shout, but to coax it into consciousness with the gentlest of touches. I reach for the heavy velvet drapes, the fabric thick and cool between my fingers, and I pull them back just a few inches. A single sliver of morning light cuts through the darkness, striking the floor and reflecting upward in a soft, diffused glow. I repeat this at every window, a slow, rhythmic opening of the world. The sound of the rings sliding across the iron rods is a sharp, metallic hiss that punctuates the silence, a signal that the night has officially ended. I then turn my attention to the fireplace, kneeling on the plush rug to revive the fire. I work with the ashes, my hands becoming gray with the soft, powdery residue of the night's warmth. I add a few logs of seasoned applewood, and as they catch, a sweet, fruity aroma fills the room, cutting through the heaviness of the air. This is the scent of the morning in the high chambers, a mixture of wood smoke, expensive soap, and the crispness of fresh linens. I begin the process of laying out the king's attire for the day. Every garment is a piece of art, heavy with embroidery and history. I smooth the creases from the silk tunic, my fingers tracing the intricate patterns of gold thread that represent the lineage of a kingdom. There is a profound stillness in handling these objects when they are empty of their power, when they are merely fabric and thread waiting to be inhabited. I feel the weight of the royal mantle, the fur trim soft and luxurious against my calloused skin. A stark contrast between the life of the one who serves and the life of the one who rules. Yet in this quiet hour there is no hierarchy, only the shared experience of the morning. I move to the washstand, pouring water from a heavy silver ewer into a wide basin. The sound of the water splashing is bright and musical, a clean, sharp sound that seems to wash away the last remnants of the night. I place the linen towels, white and smelling of the sun, neatly over the wooden rail. My movements are a dance of efficiency and grace, a choreography perfected over years of repetition. I am a weaver of comfort, preparing the stage for the drama of the day to unfold. And as the king finally stirs, a low groan of returning consciousness, I retreat into the shadows, disappearing before I am truly seen. I am the invisible hand that ensures the world is ready, the silent guardian of the transition from dreams to reality, already thinking of the next task, the next hallway, the next quiet moment in the heart of the castle. The midday sun now hangs heavy and motionless directly above the central spire, casting truncated, ink-black shadows that cling to the bases of the stone walls. This is the hour of the great stillness, a time when the initial frantic energy of the morning has dissipated into a warm, drowsy haze. The castle seems to bake under the weight of the sun, the ancient granite soaking up the heat until the walls themselves radiate a gentle, pulsing warmth that you can feel against your skin without even touching them. I find myself assigned to the high galleries of the library, a place where time does not just slow down, it seems to stop entirely. The air here is different from the rest of the fortress. It is dry, still, and intoxicatingly fragrant with the scent of old parchment, dried ink, and the sweet vanilla-like rot of aging leather bindings. As I move between the towering shelves, my footsteps are muffled by the layer of fine gray dust that settles on everything like a shroud of silence. My task is simple and repetitive. I am to wipe the dust from the mahogany tables and ensure the heavy vellum folios are aligned with the edges of their carrels. I pick up a cloth, the fabric soft and frayed, and begin to move it in slow, circular motions over the dark wood. I watch as the grain of the timber emerges from beneath the gray veil, a deep, reddish-brown sea of patterns and knots. There is something profoundly hypnotic about the circular motion of my hand, a rhythm that syncs with the slow buzzing of a solitary honeybee that has wandered through an open window and is now bumping lazily against the leaded glass panes. The sound is a low, vibrating drone, a tiny engine of summer that amplifies the surrounding quiet. I pause by a window that looks out over the inner courtyard. From this height, the world below looks like a clockwork toy left out in the sun. I see the stable hands leaning against the stone troughs, their hats pulled low over their eyes, taking advantage of the lull to catch a few moments of sleep. The horses stand motionless in their stalls, their tails flickering occasionally to ward off a fly, their heads hanging low in a shared state of midday lethargy. Even the fountain in the center of the square seems to splash with less vigor, the water falling into the basin with a soft, melodic plop, plop, plop that sounds like a heartbeat. I return to my work, moving to the furthest corner of the library, where the most ancient scrolls are kept. Here, the silence is even deeper, a physical pressure against the ears. I run my fingers along the spines of books that haven't been opened in 100 years. The texture varies. Some are rough like shark skin. Others are smooth and cool like polished bone. I imagine the monks and scholars who sat in these very chairs, their quills scratching against the page in a frantic attempt to capture thought before it vanished. Now, those thoughts are trapped in the darkness between the covers, sleeping in the heat. I find a small stool in the shadow of a massive pillar and allow myself a moment of rest. I lean my head back against the cold stone, closing my eyes. I can feel the vibration of the castle, the distant tectonic shifts of a building that has stood for a millennium. It is a slow, grounding sensation, a reminder that I am part of something vast and enduring. In this moment, I am not a servant, and I am not a boy. I am merely a consciousness, floating in a sea of history and sunlight. The light begins to shift, turning from a harsh white to a rich, honeyed amber, as the sun starts its long, slow descent toward the western battlements. The shadows in the library begin to stretch, reaching out across the floorboards like long, dark fingers. I stand up, my joints feeling loose and heavy, and begin the walk back down toward the lower levels. The transition from the dry heat of the library to the cooler, damp air of the stone stairwells is like stepping into a pool of water. The air is refreshing, carrying with it the faint, salty tang of the sea breeze that always picks up as the afternoon wanes. I pass through the great hall, which is now empty and echoing. The long banquet tables are bare, their surfaces reflecting the golden light streaming through the stained glass. The colors, deep rubies, vibrant emeralds, and sapphire blues, spill across the floor in pools of liquid light. I walk through them, my clothes momentarily stained with the colors of kings, before I emerge back into the gray stone corridors. My next duty calls me to the laundry gardens, a hidden space within the inner walls where the linens are hung to dry. The air here is filled with the scent of soap and wet cloth, a clean, sharp contrast to the dusty library. Thousands of white sheets hang from hempen ropes, billowing slowly in the breeze like the sails of a phantom fleet. I walk between the rows of fabric, the cool, damp linen brushing against my face and shoulders, a tactile symphony of softness. The world is muffled here. I can see nothing but white walls of fabric and the blue sky above. It is a labyrinth of purity, a place to lose oneself in the rhythm of the wind and the snapping of the cloth. I spend what feels like hours simply folding, my hands moving in the same patterns used by my mother and her mother before her. The sun is sinking lower, the sky turning a soft, bruised peach, and the first hints of the evening chill begin to creep into the air. The sun has finally dipped below the jagged line of the horizon, leaving behind a sky the color of a fading bruise, deep indigos, smoky violets, and a thin, lingering streak of burning copper. This is the hour of the blue dusk, that fragile bridge between the world of action and the world of rest. As the natural light retreats, the castle begins to surrender its sharp edges to the gathering gloom. The corners of the corridors dissolve into ink, and the high, vaulted ceilings vanish into a bottomless black void. Now comes the most solemn of my duties, the lighting of the torches. I carry a long brass taper, its small flame flickering like a captured star, shielding it with my palm against the sudden drafts that haunt the stairwells. I move from bracket to bracket, a silent bringer of light. Each time I touch the flame to the resinous wood of a torch, there is a sharp, satisfying crackle, a tiny explosion of life that sends a shower of golden sparks spiraling into the air. The fire takes hold with a low, guttural roar, casting long, dancing shadows that leap and stretch against the masonry. The smell of burning pine and pitch begins to fill the halls, a heavy, ancient scent that signals the closing of the day. There is a primal comfort in this ritual. As the circle of light expands around me, the cold, oppressive weight of the stone seems to soften. The orange glow bathes the walls in a flickering warmth, turning the gray granite into the color of toasted honey. I am an architect of atmosphere, painting the castle with fire, one corridor at a time, creating islands of safety in the vast, encroaching ocean of the night. I descend once more into the heart of the great hall, which now feels like a cathedral of shadows. The echoes of the day's voices have settled into the floorboards, leaving behind a silence so thick it feels like velvet. I move along the perimeter, igniting the massive iron cressets. The light reflects off the polished suits of armor standing guard in the niches, making them appear to breathe as the flames dance across their steel visors. I find myself slowing down, my movements becoming more fluid and rhythmic. The exhaustion of the day is no longer a sharp ache. It has transformed into a heavy, pleasant lethargy that settles into my limbs like silt at the bottom of a river. I can hear the muffled sounds of the castle settling, the groaning of the massive timber beams as they cool, the scurrying of a mouse behind the wainscoting, the distant, rhythmic clanging of the iron portcullis being lowered for the night. These are the sounds of a house going to sleep, a giant drawing a long, shuddering breath before closing its eyes. My path takes me past the kitchens one last time, where the staff are sharing a final, quiet meal. The clink of wooden spoons against ceramic bowls and the low hum of tired conversation provide a grounding human counterpoint to the grand, silent emptiness of the royal quarters. I do not join them yet. I prefer the solitude of the transition, the feeling of being the last one to watch over the dying embers of the day. I make my way to the highest watchtower, climbing the narrow, winding steps until my lungs burn and the air grows thin and cold. Out here, on the battlements, the world is a tapestry of shadows. Below, the village fires are blinking out one by one, like embers being crushed into the earth. The forest beyond the walls is a solid wall of blackness, whispering in the night wind. I lean my elbows against the cool, damp stone of the crenellations and look up. The stars are beginning to pierce through the veil of the atmosphere, sharp, cold points of light that have watched over this castle since the first stone was laid. The wind hums a low, mournful tune through the arrow slits, a sound that has no beginning and no end. It carries the scent of wild thyme, wet earth, and the distant metallic tang of the coming frost. In this high, lonely place, the burdens of service feel small and insignificant. The hierarchy of the court, the demands of the king, the endless cycle of scrubbing and polishing, it all fades away beneath the infinite canopy of the night sky. I am just a speck of dust in a fortress made of mountains, a brief heartbeat in the long life of the stone. I stand there for a long time, breathing in the cold, clean air, letting the silence wash over me until my mind is as clear and still as a mountain pool. The world is at peace, held in the cradle of the night, and I am its silent witness. The light of my final taper has burned down to a small, trembling nub, the blue flame dancing precariously near my fingertips. Yet I do not hurry. The castle has entered its deepest state of being, a phase where the stone itself seems to hum with a low-frequency vibration that only those who live within its marrow can truly feel. I begin my final descent, leaving the grandeur of the high towers and the velvet-lined corridors of the nobility behind. My destination is the subterranean world, the network of passages that run like veins beneath the skin of the fortress, where the air is eternally cool and the silence is layered with the weight of the entire mountain pressing down from above. As I walk, the flickering light of my candle casts long, distorted shadows that stretch across the vaulted ceilings, making the gargoyles carved into the corbels look as though they are nodding in a slow, heavy rhythm. Every footfall on the damp stone is a dull thud that echoes into the distance, a lonely sound that marks the end of my public existence. In the day, I am a tool, a pair of hands, a silent shadow. But in this hour, in the blue-black intimacy of the night, I return to myself. I pass the laundry vats, now empty and smelling of lye and cold water, their wooden rims stained white like the bones of some great beast. I pass the grain stores, where the scent of dry husk and earth is so thick you can almost taste it on the back of your tongue. The further down I go, the more the world of the king feels like a dream I had many years ago. The politics, the wars, the heavy crowns, they are all thin air compared to the absolute reality of this cold, enduring stone. I reach the heavy, iron-banded door that leads to the servants' dormitory, but I do not enter just yet. Instead, I pause in the small alcove where the well is situated. The water here comes from a spring deep within the bedrock, and even in the height of summer, it is as cold as a winter stream. I lower the bucket, the hempen rope rasping against the wooden roller, a dry, rhythmic sound that is the last voice of the waking day. The splash of the bucket hitting the water far below is a distant, hollow gulp. When I draw it up, the water is crystal clear, reflecting the tiny spark of my candle like a fallen star. I wash my face, the freezing liquid shocking my skin and rinsing away the day's dust, the grease from the kitchen, and the invisible residue of being watched. I feel the water drip from my chin, each bead falling back into the bucket with a tiny crystalline chime. This is my purification, a private baptism that marks the boundary between the world of labor and the world of rest. My hands, red and calloused from 1,000 chores, look pale and ghost-like under the water's surface. I dry them on my rough tunic, feeling the texture of the coarse wool, a grounding, honest sensation. Finally, I enter the dormitory. The room is a long, low-ceilinged hall, its walls unadorned, and its floor covered in a thick layer of fresh straw. that crackles softly underfoot. The air is warm and heavy with the smell of dozens of sleeping bodies, a mixture of sweat, wool, and the faint, sweet scent of the straw itself. It is not an unpleasant smell. It is the scent of a hive, of a collective that has worked until exhaustion and has now found sanctuary. The only light comes from a single dying hearth at the far end of the room, where a log of peat smolders with a dull red eye. I move to my own pallet, a humble arrangement of sacks stuffed with dried bracken and covered with a heavy, moth-eaten blanket. As I sit down, the straw beneath me groans and shifts, conforming to the shape of my body. The relief of sitting is so profound, it feels like a physical ache leaving my bones, a slow draining of tension that starts at the crown of my head and flows down through my spine, out into the floor. I begin the slow process of unlacing my boots. The leather is soft and warm from the heat of my feet, and as I pull them off, the cool air hits my skin like a soothing balm. I massage my arches, feeling the knots of the day's miles beginning to loosen. Every muscle in my legs seems to sigh in unison, a silent chorus of gratitude for the end of the journey. I lie back, and for a moment the world spins in a slow clockwise rotation as my equilibrium adjusts to the horizontal. Above me, the ceiling is a tapestry of shadows, shifting and morphing in the dying firelight. I pull the heavy blanket up to my chin, the wool rough against my neck, providing a weight that feels like a protective shield. I listen to the breathing of my fellow servants, a complex, overlapping rhythm of deep snores, soft whistles, and the occasional mumble of someone caught in the middle of a dream. It is a symphony of the unconscious, a reminder that even here, in the heart of power, we are all subject to the same biological necessity. My thoughts begin to lose their edges, fraying like the hem of an old tapestry. I find myself thinking of the bread I baked this morning, the way the dough felt under my palms, elastic and alive. I think of the king's crown sitting on its velvet cushion, cold and indifferent. I think of the stars I saw from the battlements, infinite and unblinking. These images began to merge and blend. The crown becomes a circle of stars. The bread becomes the golden stone of the castle. The boundaries of my identity begin to dissolve. I am no longer a servant, no longer a boy with tired feet. I am the breath in the corridor. I am the heat in the hearth. I am the silence in the library. The darkness is no longer something outside of me. It is something I am becoming. It is a deep subterranean lake, still and black and perfectly clear. I feel myself drifting out onto its surface, the ripples of my consciousness fading away into nothingness. The weight of the castle above me does not feel heavy anymore. It feels like a blanket, a mile of solid history protecting me from the chaos of the outside world. The sounds of the dormitory fade into a distant, rhythmic hum, like the sound of the sea heard through a seashell. The last flicker of the peat fire dies out, leaving the room in a state of perfect, velvety blackness. There is no tomorrow yet, no bells to ring, no fires to light, no floors to scrub. There is only this singular, suspended moment of absolute peace. The cold air on my cheeks, the warmth of the blanket, the smell of the straw, it all converges into a single point of existence, and then that point expands until it encompasses everything. My eyes close, not because I am forcing them, but because they have no more work to do. The darkness pulls me under, a gentle, irresistible current that carries me away from the shore of the waking world. I let go of the day. I let go of the stone. I let go of the fire. I sink down, down into the soft, welcoming embrace of a sleep that has been earned through every step, every breath, and every silent hour. I am home. I am still. I am asleep. The darkness in the dormitory is not an absence of light, but a presence of its own. A thick, living texture that feels as though it is pressing against my eyelids with the weight of 1,000 years of history. Even as I lie perfectly still, my mind continues to wander through the architecture of the day, retracing the labyrinthine corridors like a ghost that cannot find its rest. I think of the great hall's floor and how the light from the high windows earlier today didn't just illuminate the stone, but seemed to sink into it, as if the granite were thirsty for the sun. I remember a single tiny crack in the masonry near the eastern archway, a hairline fracture where a miniature forest of moss has taken root, a world of green so small and secret that I am likely the only soul in the entire kingdom who knows of its existence. There is a strange, quiet power in knowing the castle's flaws, the hidden places where the grand facade falters. I think of the dust I wiped away in the library. It felt like the powdered bones of the past, a fine gray silt that settles on everything, reminding us that even the most powerful words ever written will eventually be reclaimed by the silence. The rhythmic breathing of the others around me has slowed now, deepening into that heavy, rhythmic tide that signals the onset of the third watch. It is a slow, oceanic sound, the rise and fall of chests, the occasional rustle of a body turning in the straw, the distant, muffled thud of a heavy beam settling in the heat of the dying summer. I find myself focusing on the sounds that most people ignore. The castle is never truly quiet. It is a giant stone musical instrument played by the wind and the changing temperature. I can hear the infinitesimal contraction of the iron sconces as they cool, a series of tiny metallic tinks that mark the passage of the hours. I can hear the way the air moves through the arrow slits in the upper galleries, a low, haunting whistle that changes pitch depending on the strength of the breeze, like a flute made of mountain. I think of the water in the cisterns, deep and dark, rippling slightly as the earth shifts its weight. My hands, resting atop the rough wool of my blanket, feel heavy and disconnected from my body, as if they are two stones I have dropped onto a soft patch of moss. I can feel the pulse in my fingertips, a slow, steady throb that echoes the heartbeat of the building. We are intertwined, the servant and the stone. I have scrubbed these floors until my skin felt thin, and in doing so, I have left a part of myself in the grain of the rock. I am a part of the castle's memory now, a silent witness to the way the shadows stretch and the way the light dies. I think of the king's chambers again, so far above me, and the way the heavy velvet curtains must be swaying ever so slightly in the draught, a slow, rhythmic dance of shadows that no one is awake to see. There is a beauty in the things that happen without an audience. The way a single spark can dance in a cold hearth for hours, or the way the moonlight paints silver patterns on the floor of an empty chapel. My thoughts begin to drift into the surreal, the boundaries of the room dissolving into a mist of memory and imagination. I see the kitchen fire again, but now the flames are moving in slow motion, like liquid gold pouring through the air. I see the white sheets in the laundry garden, but they have become massive, silent clouds that I am walking through, the damp fabric cooling my face and smelling of rain and distant hills. The straw beneath me feels like a field of tall grass, swaying in a wind that smells of clover and old books. I am no longer confined to this pallet. I am floating upward, through the ceiling, through the layers of stone and timber, past the sleeping nights and the silent hounds, until I am hovering just above the highest spire. From here, the world is a sea of indigo, and the castle is a dark island, solid and unmoving against the rushing stars. I see the river that winds around the base of the cliffs, a silver ribbon of movement in a world that has turned to glass. The water flows over the rocks with a sound that is both a hiss and a hum, a constant, unchanging note that anchors the night. I feel the coldness of the high air, a sharp, exhilarating clarity that washes away the last of my fatigue, replacing it with a sense of infinite lightness. I am a bird with stone wings. I am a shadow with a heart of fire. I return to my body with a start, the sound of a distant owl hooting from the bell tower bringing me back to the reality of the dormitory. The air here is warmer now, humid and still. I can smell the faint, lingering scent of the lavender I tucked into my pillowcase weeks ago. A ghost of a smell, sweet and dusty. I let my breath fall into sync with the person sleeping next to me, a slow, synchronized rhythm that feels like a long, steady pull on an oar. We are all rowing together through the night, moving toward a morning that is still hours away. I think of the tasks that await me, the fires to be lit, the water to be carried, the silver to be polished, but they do not feel like burdens. They feel like a series of quiet meditations, a way to move through the world without disturbing its peace. The repetition is my sanctuary. I find comfort in the knowledge that tomorrow will be exactly like today, and the day after that will be the same. In a world of kings and wars, there is a profound safety in the unchanging routine of the stones. The darkness is now a warm, thick liquid that I am sinking into, a dark honey that coats my mind and slows my thoughts until they are nothing but single words, glowing briefly before fading out. Stone, fire, water, silence. The words lose their meaning and become shapes, then colors, then finally just a deep, resonant vibration that fills the space behind my eyes. The final layer of consciousness begins to peel away, like the skin of an onion being removed to reveal the hollow core. I am no longer thinking about the castle. I am the castle. I feel the roots of the mountain beneath me, the cold weight of the foundations, the intricate network of stairs and hallways that form my nervous system. The stars above are my eyes, and the wind in the eaves is my breath. I am vast, I am ancient, and I am perfectly, utterly still. The heavy blanket over my chest is no longer a burden. It is the layer of earth that protects the sleeping seed. I feel the tension in my jaw dissolve, the muscles in my neck lengthening as my head sinks deeper into the bracken. The world is a whisper, a fading echo of a bell that was struck 1,000 years ago. There is no more work to be done. The tray is empty, the fire is out, the doors are locked. I am the silence that remains when the last candle is extinguished. I am the pause between the breaths of the universe. I am drifting further and further from the shore, into the deep, dark water, where there are no shadows and no light, only the infinite velvet embrace of the dreamless void. Everything is exactly as it should be. The stone is cold, the straw is warm, and the night is long. I am falling. I am floating. I am gone. The transition from the edge of sleep to the abyss of the unconscious is not a fall, but a slow, heavy dissolution of the self into the very fabric of the fortress. I am no longer lying on a pallet of straw. I am beginning to feel as though my limbs are extending into the floor, my fingers becoming the mortar between the stones, my veins tracing the hairline fractures in the granite. This is the stage of the night where the mind stops being a narrator and starts being a witness to the secret life of the world. I find myself dwelling on the microscopic history of a single drop of water hanging from a stalactite in the deep cellars, gathering its weight for hours until it finally, inevitably, falls into a dark pool with a sound that echoes through the silence like a funeral bell. I can feel that vibration in my marrow. I think of the great gate, those massive slabs of oak and iron that stand between us and the wild world outside. At night, they do not just bar the way, they lean into their hinges, groaning under the immense pressure of the wind that comes off the moors, a wind that carries the scent of ancient pine forests and forgotten battlefields. I imagine the iron of the bolts cooling, the molecules of the metal settling into a tighter, colder embrace. Everything in this castle is constantly shifting, breathing, and contracting, and in this state of near sleep, I am tuned to every frequency of its movement. The air in the dormitory has become a thick, warm soup of collective existence. Each breath taken by my companions is a thread in a great, invisible tapestry that blankets us all. I find myself counting the seconds between the inhalations, a slow, hypnotic exercise that drains the last remnants of urgency from my mind. I think of the candlemaker's workshop, where hundreds of tallow dips are hanging in the dark, their wax cold and pale like the fingers of ghosts. I think of the tapestries in the Queen's Solar, where the woven hounds are forever chasing the woven stags through a forest of silk and silver thread. In the dark, those hounds seem to move, their embroidered legs stretching as the fabric reacts to the humidity of the night. I am moving among them now, not as a servant, but as a breeze, a formless presence that glides over the surfaces of things. I feel the roughness of the undyed wool, the sharpness of the gold wire, the cold slickness of the marble mantelpieces. I am exploring the castle's dreams. Does the stone dream of the mountains it once was? Does the wood dream of the sunlight and the rain it felt before the axe fell? I believe it does. I can feel the ancestral memory of the oak beams, a slow, woody pulse that remembers the swaying of branches in a gale. My mind drifts further down, beneath the foundations, into the black, silent earth where the roots of the castle are buried. It is a place of absolute sensory deprivation, a silence so profound that it has a sound of its own, a low humming roar, like the inside of a massive shell. I am floating in that darkness, weightless and free. The chores of the day, the scrubbing of the soot-stained kettles, the emptying of the heavy ash pans, the endless polishing of the brass doorknobs, They are all tiny, insignificant specks of light that are being swallowed by this vast, benevolent shadow. There is no time here. A minute and a century are the same thing to the bedrock. I think of the generations of servants who have slept in this very room, their bodies now part of the churchyard soil, their dreams forgotten, yet their presence still felt in the smoothness of the stones and the tilt of the door frames. We are a long, unbroken chain of shadows, a silent army that keeps the world of the living from falling into ruin. There is a deep, quiet pride in this realization, a sense of belonging that transcends the humble nature of my work. I am a guardian of the silence. I am the one who ensures that the world stays still, so that the great can play at being powerful. The coldness of the night begins to seep through the walls, meeting the warmth of the room and creating a thin, invisible mist that clings to the floor. I pull my blanket tighter, the coarse fibers catching on the calluses of my hands. This sensation, the friction of wool against skin, is the last anchor I have to the physical world. I focus on it, letting the texture fill my entire consciousness. It is a rough, honest feeling, the smell of lanolin and old earth. It reminds me of the sheep on the hillsides, huddled together against the rain, their hearts beating in a slow, rhythmic unison. I am one of them now. I am part of the herd, sheltered within the fold of the castle's walls. The distant sound of a single, lonely bell from the village below ripples through the air, the sound distorted by the fog and the distance until it is nothing more than a low, metallic throb. It is the midnight bell, the pivot point of the darkness, the moment where the day truly dies and the new one has not yet been born. This is the void. This is the space between heartbeats. I am sinking into a dream of water. I am a river flowing through a limestone cavern, my surface smooth as glass, my depths filled with the secrets of the mountain. I am moving toward a great, dark ocean that has no horizon and no shore. The sound of my own breathing has become the sound of the tide, a slow, eternal that washes over the pebbles of my thoughts, smoothing them, rounding them, until they are nothing but perfect, featureless spheres. The castle is gone. The king is gone. The service is gone. There is only the movement of the water and the weight of the dark. I feel a profound sense of release, a shedding of the self that is as natural as a snake shedding its skin. I am not the boy who carries the tray. I am the stillness that follows the sound. I am the shadow that the flame casts. I am the space between the stars. The darkness is not empty. It is full of a soft, pulsing light that I can only see when my eyes are closed. It is the light of the earth itself, the glow of the minerals, and the slow, slow heat of the stones. I am folding into that light, becoming a part of the glow. My heart rate has slowed to a steady, powerful rhythm that matches the tectonic pulse of the world. Each beat is a drum in the distance, calling me further into the forest of sleep. The trees there are made of smoke, and the leaves are made of whispers. I am walking among them, my feet making no sound on the floor of shadows. I find a place of perfect rest, a hollow in the roots of a great ancient tree that is made of the castle's own history. I lie down in that hollow, and the smoke leaves fall over me, burying me in a soft, gray silence. I am safe. I am hidden. I am forgotten by the world of the sun. The last thought I have is not a word, but a feeling. The feeling of a cold stone being warmed by a hand. A brief, flickering connection that is enough to last a lifetime. And then, even that feeling fades. The water closes over my head, and I am finally, truly part of the night. The silence is complete. The rest is absolute. I am no longer waiting for the morning. I am the night itself.